We're here with Caroline Mason, Chief Executive of the Esmée Fairbairn Foundation, so thank you very much for having us in your offices. Today we're going to talk about the Koreo Prize and do a sort of a further exploration of Caroline's journey into the sector and what arrived you in this place, and how the prize resounds for you. So thank you very much for having us. First, could you please give us a brief introduction of yourself?
I am a linguist, actually, by education. So I did languages at university, and then worked for Reuters for 12 years when I left university. And Reuters was a bit like the civil servants there, where you kind of you were sort of taken and thrown into situations and jobs in quite an interesting way. And when I think back now of the kind of responsibilities I had at a very young age, it was quite extraordinary, actually. And so I did everything from running a technical development, software development group, through to looking at being the global product manager for Reuters News, looking at the future of web technologies for Reuters, core business, so really mixed kind of bag. I left Reuters because I started having children, basically, and so I set up my own consultancy business and worked in financial services for about 7-8 years, running my own business, which basically took something from idea to first sale. So somebody would say, we need a new credit derivatives desk. So I'd write the business plan, get it through the regulators, sort out the IT, build a system, get it so that there was somebody sitting at a desk making money from it. And I did that for all sorts of things in financial services, created a wealth management business for a private bank, all sorts of things. And then I realised back in probably about 2000, that actually even then already it was really clear to me that financial services was not a great place to work in anymore, and it just wasn't me. So I left and again co-founded Investing for Good, so trying to use my skills in terms of financial services skills but for the social sector, and then through that sort of learned more about social investment and social enterprise, and then moved from there to Charity Bank, where I was Chief Operating Officer of Charity Bank's a retail regulated savings bank, but was also a charity at the same time. And then I worked at Big Society Capital, was kind of employee number 1 or 2, and basically worked to kind of set it up with government, which was really interesting. And then came to Esmée, and which is my dream job, actually. I absolutely love it.
Brilliant.
So that's my story.
And what does the Esmée Fairbairn Foundation do?
We are an independent grant maker and funder, so we work in the areas of the arts, the environment and food, social justice, and children and young people. We have an annual grant making spend of about 36 million, and we also have a £45 million allocation to social investment. So we invest about £5 or £6 million a year into the sector in terms of either equity or debt. So our total funding is about between 40 and 42 million pounds a year.
So you mentioned that you kind of realised that the financial industry wasn't really to your taste, or kind of wasn't a good place to be. So what drew you into kind of more philanthropic work?
The reason I think in financial services I realised is that financial services had become completely disconnected from its purpose. So there were these very complex mechanisms, financing mechanisms, very complex technology going in, like robo-trading, limit setting. Everything was very, very transactional, lots of money, but completely and utterly disconnected from what the implications were for when those when those interactions happened, what then actually happened in the real economy. Like, did people lose jobs as a result of it? Did, you know, what would happen to communities? And my personal life had always been very much not from financial services. Most of my friends didn't work in financial services, and my family doesn't work in financial services or in any form of sort of kind of corporate, always in sort of industry, and so increasingly I wanted to reconnect what I knew back into something that was about ordinary people and the real economy and communities. And so that's why the sort of social investment bit was the bit that kind of first got me into the sector, because that was the bridge, I suppose, between purposeful investment using investment capital to positive purpose. So that was the bridge. And then from that, it's kind of gone into encompass now also philanthropy as well as social investment.
Great. So you described this role as being like the thing that you absolutely love doing. What do you take inspiration from on like either a daily basis or more on a wider lifetime scale?
It's hugely humbling. I mean, I learn so much every single day. I mean, there's not a day that doesn't go by when, because of the breadth of our funding all the way from the, I know a lot about hedgerows now and how important hedgerows are, which I didn't know before, and frogs and mushrooms, you know, and all the way through to, you know, we do a lot of museums around how difficult it is for curation now, and how important good curation is, all the way through to child sexual exploitation, FGM. So, you know, a lot of preconceptions just get blown away by learning about actually the realities of all of these things and how important they are and how important they are to people. So, and also you meet extraordinary people doing extraordinary things on very small margins, and they are utterly amazing. So it's very humbling. It's, you know, you learn a lot. It's very humbling. But also intellectually it's very exciting, and what's great about this also is that I get to still keep the financial services aspect of it, because we have our endowment, which is quite a big endowment, so I sit on the investment committee for that, so I'm still keep that connection, but then that's also the bridge, the sort of social investment, you know, how do you make that more purposeful, so it's kind of like great. It is. I am the
Sounds
luckiest
wonderful.
person on the planet.
So this is a nice kind of feed on from that. Can you tell us about a project or initiative that you're currently excited about?
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you one example of some of the stuff that we do, which I think is incredibly hopeful. Which is in Durham. There is a charity that focuses on food. One of your food security, but also food poverty, food, and how it links into communities. And what they realised was that around Durham there are a lot of small sustainable farms. And what they also realised was in and around Durham there are a lot of institutions, restaurants, event management firms that wanted to source their produce from sustainable local sources, but there was no mechanism with which to do that. They didn't, you know, the economies of scale aren't great. You've got to sign loads of contracts. So we grant funded this thing called the Durham Food Hub to create, if you like, a little market to manage those contracts and to kind of facilitate all of that. But then what they're also done is there's a local SME, which is a wholesale, which specialises in wholesale distribution of foods. So the pilot worked really well. So now we've funded them to kind of go to the next level to scale it up into something. Now, to me, that just seems like absolutely brilliant. You know, it's just so simple, but actually it means that you've got sustainable farmers being more having access to a market. You have got local restaurants being able to source things locally, the money, the benefits stay within the community. You're also using existing SMEs which exist there, so if this works really well there may be job creation. So for me, those are the
Perfect.
kind of things that we try and find and work with, which are hugely exciting, I think, and play to the strengths of each of those kind of elements of the resilient community.
Absolutely. So the Koreo Prize is based around these 6 goals, and it's looking at how we can translate the UN global goals into a UK context. So do you think that this translation is relevant for the UK? And if so, why? And then to move on from that, do you think that young people care about the global goals and know about them enough? Maybe not within like the UN's context, but more on like a daily life basis. Yeah.
I mean, I think they are totally pertinent. I think they're completely pertinent. And do I think young people understand this? I think they do. I think they understand this in a really fundamental way. In fact, I think they understand it better than most of the people that are actually responsible for the organisations trying to solve these problems. I genuinely, I say this quite a lot. I often sit in meetings talking about leadership or the future, and I often say we're the wrong people in this room. We are utterly the wrong people, because we had it easy. I mean, I went to university. I didn't have to pay for it. I wouldn't have been able to go if I hadn't had my university paid for. I left university. I got a job. So I could afford to put down a deposit on a flat, and those were just things that were just a given, And if I look at, I have 4 children. They're aged between 15 and 22, and I know for them the chances of them is even being able to rent, probably, or getting a job, or the world is a very, very different place. So I think they understand these things in a really, really direct way, in a way that most people in their 40s and 50s and 60s just don't, actually, because they've never had to. So whilst we understand it intellectually or emotionally, we're not really faced with those issues, whereas I think most young people do see it. I also think in terms of the gender inequality, even if I look at the changes that have happened in my generation, when I first started work, I wasn't allowed to wear trousers in the office. It was women weren't allowed to wear trousers. When I think of some of the things that I put up with when I was started work, now my daughters would just think that was completely inconceivable, and they just wouldn't accept it. So I think whilst we've come a long way, I still think we've got a huge way to go. But I think that what I'm really pleased to see is that younger women are just very clear about how this is utterly, utterly unacceptable. Whereas I didn't really feel that. I kind of knew it was unacceptable, but you kind of just, really? Okay, well, I can't wear trousers, right? I'll wear a skirt. Whereas now, those sort of things just wouldn't happen. So I think I'm very hopeful.
Which of these issues would you say you feel strongest about, or has most resonance for you?
I'm going to say gender inequality is one of them, because I think the danger is that because advances have been made, we sort of slip back into becoming quite comfortable about it. But when I see what's happened over the last maybe 10 to 15 years, I think we're beginning to go backwards in terms of gender inequality, and that worries me. And also I think it's extraordinary because it affects 50% of the population. So it's like, how does this even happen? I mean, how can it be that 50% of the population get paid less than the other 50%? I mean, it's just, anyway. So I think mind-boggling, and I think for us as a nation, I think community is if Brexit has shown us one thing, it's shown that we are breaking up. We are not a community as a nation, and that trickles all the way down. And I think that the fact that we don't have a community spirit within our country from top to bottom has been totally revealed. And I think that the idea of community is a very strong one, and I don't mean that in terms of place. I mean that in terms of being a community of people and what that means, and the give and take that requires across the board. I think we've lost that, and for me, that we need to regain that.
Absolutely. So what drew you to becoming one of the Koreo judges?
Oh, because I think Rachel's just amazing. Because she just is great. I'm a huge fan. So I just think she's, it's a great idea, and the freedom of it. I think and I think you mentioned earlier that some of the people had said how great that it was just such an open canvas, and so little of what happens now is truly an open canvas. A lot of these prizes or whatever, they're quite constrained or quite prescriptive, and I love the open canvas element of it. I think that's really refreshing.
As a judge, what would you be excited to see in the entries, bearing in mind how open it is? And
just excited to be doing it, actually. Well, I think the combination, as you said, the combination of the judges, I think, is really interesting. I think we'll have really interesting debates about it. I love learning from things. So for me, seeing what comes out and the invention, and I'm sure there'll be lots of invention and ingenuity out of it. And also, one of the things, again, coming back to community, and is this idea we do somehow need to have a message of hope in some of these things. And that's what I'm really hoping that comes out of it, that this doesn't kind of make us think so much about the problem, but how the future might look different, and that there is hope. And that's what I'm hoping to see out of it. Because I think we know what the problems are. Yeah. So I would love to see this to be a very hopeful thing. Exciting and hopeful, that shows actually young people really, really actually will probably be better custodians of the future than we have been of the past.
Great.
I don't know whether they will be, but I'm hoping.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right, well, that's it. Thank you very much for answering your questions.